Welcome to our channel. Today, we embark on a journey through the mystical village of Whispering Woods. Join us as we follow Lyra, a young apprentice shadow weaver, on her daily routine filled with excitement and mysteries. Lyra's boots tapped rhythmically against the cobblestones as she walked along the winding path to Eldritch's workshop. The morning mist hung low, casting an ethereal glow over the ancient trees that framed the sleepy village. Each day, Lyra felt a mix of anticipation and unease as she approached the towering, shadowy structure where she trained under the last master shadow weaver. Stepping inside the workshop, the familiar sense of parchment and candle wax greeted her. The austere facade of the building hid a world brimming with arcane secrets, and Lyra was eager to uncover them. "You're early, as always," a gruff voice called out from the shadows. Eldritch emerged, his weathered face showing a hint of approval. "Good. There's much work to be done today." Lyra bowed her head respectfully. "What would you have me do, Master Eldritch?" "The storage room is in disarray again. I need you to organize the shelves and ensure everything is in its proper place," Eldritch instructed, his piercing gaze fixed on her. "And be careful. There are treasures within those walls that require a delicate touch." Lyra nodded, her curiosity piqued. "I understand." She moved towards the storage room, the floorboards creaking beneath her feet. Inside, the room was a maze of arcane artifacts, ancient books, and half-finished tapestries. As Lyra methodically sorted through the items, her hand brushed against a hidden compartment in the wall. Intrigued, she pressed her palm against it, revealing a recessed cavity. Nestled within was an ornate tapestry, its threads shimmering with an otherworldly light. Lyra's breath caught as she gently extracted it, captivated by the intricate patterns that seemed to come alive before her eyes. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into Lyra's discoveries and the secrets that lie within the shadows of Whispering Woods. A sense of unease crept up her spine, and Lyra glanced over her shoulder, half expecting Eldritch to materialize and scold her. But the workshop remained silent, save for the faint whispers that seemed to emanate from the tapestry itself. Lyra's curiosity got the better of her, and she ran her fingers over the delicate threads, tracing the intricate designs. Suddenly, a kaleidoscope of images flashed through her mind's swirling shadows, a towering forest, and the ominous presence of a looming curse. Lyra gasped, dropping the tapestry as if it had burned her. The fabric crumpled to the floor, the whispers growing louder and more insistent. Stumbling backwards, Lyra collided with a shelf, sending several books tumbling to the ground. The muffled thud echoed through the workshop, and Eldritch's footsteps approached, his expression unreadable. "What is the meaning of this, Lyra?" he demanded, surveying the disarray. His gaze fell upon the discarded tapestry, and his eyes widened imperceptibly. "I am sorry, Master Eldritch," Lyra stammered, her heart pounding. "I was organizing the shelves when I discovered this. I didn't mean to dash." Eldritch raised a hand, silencing her. "Enough." He strode forward, carefully retrieving the tapestry and cradling it in his arms. "You should not have touched this. It is not for your eyes." Lyra opened her mouth to protest, but the stern look on Eldritch's face stopped her. I didn't realize." "What is it?" Eldritch's expression darkened. "Something that should have remained hidden." He turned and swept out of the room, the tapestry disappearing into the shadows. Lyra stood rooted to the spot, her mind racing. What had she seen in that vision, and why had Eldritch reacted with such alarm? Shakily, she began to gather the fallen books, her fingers trembling. As she returned them to the shelves, a sense of foreboding crept over her. The workshop, once a place of fascination and wonder, now felt laden with secrets and dangerous mysteries. By the time Eldritch returned, Lyra had finished her task, and the room was once again in pristine order. The master's shadow weaver eyed her with an unreadable expression. "I think that is enough for today," he said, his voice low. "You may go." Lyra hesitated, her curiosity burning. "Master Eldritch, what was that tapestry? And why did you react so strongly to my discovery of it?" Eldritch's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Lyra thought he would refuse to answer. But then, with a heavy sigh, he spoke. That tapestry holds the key to an ancient curse that has haunted our village for generations. It is a burden I have carried alone for far too long. He fixed Lyra with a piercing gaze. And now it seems that burden has fallen to you as well. Lyra's eyes widened, a chill running down her spine. What do you mean? What curse? Eldritch shook his head, his weathered features etched with weariness. I cannot tell you more, not now. But be warned, Lyra, the shadows you have glimpsed are far darker than you can imagine. Tread carefully, and trust no one, not even your own family. With those ominous words, Eldritch turned and disappeared into the depths of the workshop, leaving Lyra alone with her growing sense of dread. She stared at the spot where the tapestry had been, her mind racing. What had she stumbled upon, and what role did her family play in this ancient curse? Clutching the doorframe, Lyra took a deep, steadying breath and made her way out of the workshop, the shadows seeming to reach for her as she went. As she walked home, the whispers of the tapestry echoed in her mind, a haunting refrain that promised to unravel the very fabric of her world. A hush had fallen over Whispering Woods, an unnatural stillness that set Lyra's nerves on edge as she made her way through the village's winding streets. The sun had barely risen, yet the usual bustle of activity was strangely absent, replaced by an unsettling silence that permeated the air. Lyra quickened her pace, the memory of the previous day's events still weighing heavily on her mind. The discovery of the ancient tapestry in Eldritch's workshop had unleashed something dark and foreboding, a presence that now seemed to linger in the shadows. As she rounded the corner, Lyra spotted the first signs of unrest. A group of villagers had gathered near the town square, their voices hushed and fearful as they spoke in hurried whispers. She approached cautiously, catching fragments of their conversation. Did you see it? A woman murmured, her face pale with worry. The shadows, they were alive, moving on their own. It's the curse, an elderly man responded, his trembling hands gripping the sleeve of his coat. I tried to tell the elder, but he wouldn't listen. Now we're all in danger. Lyra's heart raced as she listened, a growing sense of dread taking root within her. The curse, the very mention of it sent a chill down her spine. Somehow, she knew that the ancient tapestry and the strange occurrences were inextricably linked, a web of mysteries that she had unwittingly stumbled upon. Excusing herself from the group, Lyra continued on her path, her mind racing with questions. She needed answers, and she knew just where to find them. The village elder's home stood at the edge of the village, a weathered stone structure that seemed to melt into the surrounding forest. Lyra approached the door and knocked, her knuckles rapping against the aged wood. After a few moments, the door swung open, and the elder's wizened face appeared. Lyra, he greeted, his brow furrowing with concern. I was expecting you. Come, child, we have much to discuss. He ushered her inside, leading Lyra to a cozy sitting room. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and incense, and the walls were adorned with intricate tapestries and shelves of ancient tomes. The elder settled into a well-worn armchair, gesturing for Lyra to take a seat across from him. I'm afraid the village has been touched by a great evil, a darkness that has lurked in the shadows for centuries. Lyra leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. The curse, she said, the word tumbling from her lips with a weight she had not anticipated. The elder nodded solemnly. Yes, child, the curse. It is an ancient affliction, one that has been passed down through the generations, a legacy of the shadow weavers who once guarded this land. He paused, his weathered hands folding in his lap. The shadow weavers were tasked with maintaining the delicate balance between light and shadow, a responsibility that required great skill and discipline. But there were those who sought to bend this power to their own ends, and in doing so, they unleashed a great evil upon the world. Lyra listened, her mind whirling with the implications of his words. The tapestry I found in Eldritch's workshop, it must be connected to all of this, isn't it? Indeed, child, the elder replied. That tapestry is a relic from the time of the Shadow Weavers, a record of their triumphs and their failures. And now, it seems, the curse has been awakened once more. Lyra's brow furrowed. But how? What could have triggered it? The elder's gaze grew solemn. That, my dear, is what we must uncover. The balance has been disrupted, and the shadows themselves have been set in motion. If we do not find a way to restore that balance, the village and all who dwell within it will be consumed by the darkness. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. The weight of the elder's words was palpable, and she knew that she had stumbled upon something far greater than she had ever imagined. The curse, the shadow weavers, the tapestry, it was all connected, a tapestry of its own that Lyra had to unravel. As she rose to leave, the elder reached out and grasped her hand, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and resolve. Lyra, you must be careful. The path ahead will be perilous, and the forces you are dealing with are ancient and powerful. But I believe you have the strength to face them, for you carry the legacy of the shadow weavers within you. Lyra nodded, her determination solidifying. I'll do whatever it takes to protect my home and my people, Elder. I won't let this curse destroy us. With those words, she made her way back into the village, her steps quickening as she headed towards Eldritch's workshop. The shadows seemed to whisper and shift around her, a constant reminder of the unseen forces that now threatened her world. As Lyra approached the familiar stone building, she noticed the shadows taking on a more menacing form, twisting and contorting in ways that sent a shiver down her spine. Steeling herself, she pushed open the door and stepped inside, her eyes immediately drawn to the tapestry that had so captivated her the day before. The intricate patterns seemed to shimmer and pulse, as if imbued with a life of their own. Lyra reached out, her fingertips tracing the delicate threads, and a sudden jolt of energy surged through her. Images flashed before her eyes, a battle, a ritual, a betrayal, all woven into the fabric of the tapestry. Lyra stumbled back, her heart racing. The shadows in the workshop appeared to be moving, undulating with a sinister purpose. She knew then that she had to act, to uncover the truth before the curse consumed her village and everyone she held dear. Eldritch's voice suddenly cut through the unnatural stillness, startling Lyra. I see you've been doing some investigating of your own, my apprentice. Lyra turned to face him, her expression a mixture of determination and uncertainty. Eldritch, what is happening? The village is in peril, and this tapestry, it's at the heart of it all, isn't it? The master shadow weaver's gaze was inscrutable, his features etched with a sorrow that Lyra had never seen before. Yes, child, the tapestry holds the key to an ancient evil that has been awakened. And I fear that your family, our family, is more deeply entangled in this curse than you know. Lyra felt her breath catch in her throat, the weight of his words settling heavily upon her. The shadows seemed to close in around them, as if the very building itself had become a living, breathing entity, waiting to devour them both. The stage was set, and Lyra knew that she could no longer afford to be a mere apprentice. The fate of Whispering Woods rested on her shoulders, and she would have to summon every ounce of her courage and determination to unravel the tapestry of lies and deception that threatened to consume her world. Lyra's brow furrowed as she stared across the polished wooden table at Eldritch, her mentor and the last remaining master shadow weaver. The aging man's weathered face was drawn, his eyes ringed with shadows. The tapestry you discovered? Eldritch began, his deep voice laced with a barely perceptible tremor. It is an ancient relic, tied to a dark legacy that has haunted our village for generations. Lyra leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. What do you mean? What legacy? The vision she had experienced upon touching the tapestry had been unsettling, and the strange occurrences plaguing the village had only heightened her sense of unease. Eldritch sighed, his gnarled fingers tracing the intricate patterns on the table's surface. The shadow weavers of old were entrusted with maintaining the delicate balance between light and darkness. But some succumbed to the corrupting lure of their own power. Lyra's heart sank as the implications of his words began to sink in. You're saying my family was involved in this? That the curse is somehow tied to us? Eldritch nodded solemnly. Your grandmother Mara is the keeper of our family's darkest secrets. She has gone to great lengths to conceal the truth, even from you. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. She had always admired her grandmother's strength and influence within the village, but now a sense of dread and mistrust began to take root. What are you saying, Eldritch? What have they done? The old man's gaze grew distant, as if he were peering into the shadows of the past. Long ago, the Shadow Weavers grew arrogant, believing they could harness the power of the darkness to their own ends. Your ancestors were among them. Lyra's hands clenched into fists, her knuckles turning white. They created the curse, didn't they? The one that's tormenting our village? Eldritch nodded gravely. Yes. In their pursuit of greater power, they unwittingly opened a rift, allowing a malevolent force to take root. A force that now seeks to consume us all. Lyra's mind raced, trying to reconcile the disturbing revelation with her cherished memories of her family. But how? How could they have done this? Mara always spoke of the Shadow Weavers as guardians, protectors of the balance. She would. Eldritch replied, his voice heavy with regret. She and the others have spent generations hiding the truth, maintaining a facade of righteousness. But the tapestry you discovered holds the key to unraveling their deception. Lyra stood abruptly, pacing the small chamber as her thoughts swirled. Then we must destroy it, before the curse spreads further. She turned to Eldritch, her eyes pleading. What can we do to stop this? Eldritch raised a weathered hand, his expression grave. I'm afraid it's not that simple, child. The tapestry is the only means we have to confront the curse and its source. To do so, you must learn to wield the shadow-weaving techniques of our ancestors. Lyra's heart sank. But if my family was responsible for this, how can I trust that I won't succumb to the same temptation? The weight of her newfound power, and the implications of her family's dark legacy, threatened to overwhelm her. It is a risk we must take, Eldritch said, his voice laced with a sense of resignation. The balance has been disrupted, and only you possess the potential to restore it. But you must be willing to confront the truth, no matter how painful it may be. Lyra opened her mouth to protest, but the sound of a commotion outside the workshop cut her off. Eldritch's eyes widened, and he quickly ushered Lyra towards the door. The curse is spreading. You must hone your skills, child, for the fate of our village now rests upon your shoulders. With a growing sense of dread, Lyra hurried out into the chaos of the streets, her mind reeling from the revelations that had shattered her world. The next few days were a blur of activity, as Lyra threw herself into her shadow-weaving training, driven by a newfound sense of purpose and the weight of responsibility. Eldritch pushed her relentlessly, guiding her through the intricate techniques and the delicate balance required to manipulate the shadows. Lyra's progress was swift, her natural aptitude for the craft shining through. But with each new lesson, the gravity of her family's involvement in the curse's creation weighed heavily on her. She could no longer look at her grandmother, Mara, without seeing the deception that had been woven into the very fabric of her life. One evening, as Lyra was practicing her shadow-weaving exercises in the privacy of her room, Mara entered without warning, her piercing gaze fixed upon her granddaughter. I see you've been spending an inordinate amount of time with Eldritch as of late, Mara said, her voice tinged with suspicion. Lyra tensed, her grip tightening on the shadow thread she had been manipulating. I've been learning, grandmother. Learning about the history of the Shadow Weavers, and the responsibilities that come with wielding such power. Mara's eyes narrowed, and Lyra caught a glimpse of something akin to fear flickering across her grandmother's features. You've been prying into matters that do not concern you, child. Some secrets are best left buried. But they do concern me, grandmother, Lyra replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. I've learned of the curse, and the role our family played in its creation. How could you have kept this from me? Mara's expression darkened, and she strode forward, her imposing figure looming over Lyra. You know nothing, girl. The choices we made were necessary, to protect our legacy and the balance of this village. Lyra rose to her feet, the shadow threads falling from her grasp. Necessary? At what cost, grandmother? The people are suffering, and I. She paused, her voice trembling. I fear I may be the one to ultimately bear the burden of your actions. Mara's jaw tightened, her eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and desperation. You speak of things you cannot possibly understand. The power of the Shadow Weavers is a double-edged sword, and the responsibility of wielding it is not one to be taken lightly. Then teach me, grandmother, Lyra pleaded, her eyes earnest. Help me understand, so that I may use this power to lift the curse and save our village. Mara's expression softened, just for a moment, before hardening once more. Some burdens are not meant to be shared, child. You would do well to heed my warnings and leave the past where it belongs. With that, Mara turned and swept out of the room, leaving Lyra alone with the weight of her family's legacy and the growing sense of foreboding that permeated the air. Lyra's feet pounded against the worn cobblestones as she raced towards the elder's modest cottage on the edge of Whispering Woods. The haunting revelations about her family's past had left her reeling, and she desperately needed answers that she feared would only deepen the well of guilt and betrayal swirling within her. As she approached the cottage, the village elder emerged from the doorway, his weathered face etched with a solemn expression. Lyra skidded to a halt, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "I've been expecting you, child," the elder said, his voice gentle but grave. "Come, we have much to discuss." Lyra followed the elder into the cottage, the air thick with the scent of freshly brewed tea and the faint aroma of burning incense. The elder gestured for her to take a seat, then settled into his own chair, his gnarled fingers clasping the steaming mug before him. "The tapestry you discovered has awakened a great evil," the elder began, his eyes fixing Lyra with a steady gaze. "An ancient curse that has lain dormant for generations, waiting to be unleashed once more." Lyra leaned forward, her hands trembling as she listened intently. "But how is my family involved in all of this? Eldritch and Grandmother Mara have been keeping secrets, haven't they?" The elder nodded solemnly. "The shadow weavers of old were tasked with maintaining the balance between light and darkness. Your family was among the most gifted of these weavers, wielding great power and influence." He paused, taking a sip of his tea before continuing. "But with power came the temptation of greed and corruption. Your ancestors, in their quest for ever greater control, tapped into the darker energies, eventually creating the very curse that now plagues your village." Lyra's heart sank as the elder's words sank in. "So my family, they're responsible for all of this?" "They are," the elder confirmed, his expression grave. "And they have spent generations trying to contain the curse, even as it has slowly grown in strength, feeding on the darkness in their own hearts." Lyra's mind raced, her thoughts swirling like the shadows that had begun to creep across the village. Then why didn't they just break the curse? Why let it continue to torment us all? The elder let out a weary sigh. "Because to do so would require a great sacrifice, one that your family has been unwilling to make. The only way to truly lift the curse is to reweave the tapestry, undoing the original enchantment. But that would also unravel the very power and legacy your ancestors fought so hard to preserve." Lyra felt her stomach churn with a mix of rage and despair. "So they've doomed us all, just to protect their own legacy?" "Not all of them," the elder said, his eyes suddenly filled with a glimmer of hope. "Eldritch has been working tirelessly to find a way to break the curse without destroying your family's power. And now, with your emergence as a gifted shadow weaver, there may be a chance to succeed where others have failed." Lyra's brow furrowed in confusion. "Me? But how can I help, when my own family has been the source of this torment?" The elder reached across the table, placing a weathered hand atop Lyra's. "Because you, my child, possess a strength and moral compass that your ancestors lacked. You have the power to reweave the tapestry and lift the curse, but you must be willing to make the sacrifices that they could not." Lyra felt the weight of the elder's words settle upon her shoulders. The path ahead was fraught with peril, and the cost of success was one she was not sure she could bear. Yet, as the sounds of panic and terror echoed from the village, she knew she had no choice but to confront the truth of her family's legacy and the curse that threatened to consume them all. Steeling her resolve, Lyra stood, her eyes burning with a newfound determination. "Then tell me what I must do." The elder nodded, his lips quirking into a small, proud smile. "Come, child. Time is of the essence, and the fate of Whispering Woods rests upon your shoulders." As Lyra followed the elder out of the cottage, she felt a growing sense of dread and purpose intertwined within her. The revelations about her family's past had shattered her illusions, but they had also forged a newfound resolve. She would not allow the sins of her ancestors to doom her village. Whatever the cost, she would find a way to break the curse and restore the balance, even if it meant confronting the darkest secrets of her own lineage. The village was in chaos when Lyra and the elder emerged onto the streets. Panicked villagers darted in all directions, their cries echoing against the looming shadows that seemed to press in from every corner. Lyra's heart pounded as she surveyed the scene, her eyes searching for any sign of Eldritch or her grandmother. A sudden movement in the corner of her vision drew her attention, and Lyra saw Mara striding purposefully through the crowd, her face set in a rigid mask of determination. Without hesitation, Lyra broke into a run, weaving through the terrified villagers until she caught up to her grandmother. "Grandmother, please," Lyra cried, her voice barely audible over the din of panic. "The elder has told me everything. I know about the curse, about our family's involvement. Why didn't you tell me?" Mara's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes narrowing as she regarded Lyra. "You were not ready to bear the weight of our legacy, child. The knowledge would have only burdened you, and I sought to protect you from the truth." "Protect me?" Lyra scoffed, the anger in her voice rising. "You've been protecting our family's secrets at the expense of the entire village. How many more will suffer because of your choices?" Mara's expression hardened, her fingers tightening around the amulet that hung at her throat. "You do not understand the sacrifices we have made, the power we have wielded to keep this curse at bay. It is a burden that has fallen upon our family for generations, and one that I will not relinquish easily." Lyra felt her resolve harden, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "Then you leave me no choice. I will find a way to break the curse, even if it means going against your wishes." Before Mara could respond, a deafening roar echoed through the streets, and Lyra whirled around to see a massive, shadowy figure looming over the village. The curse had manifested, its malevolent presence radiating an aura of pure terror. Mara's eyes widened in alarm, and she reached out to grasp Lyra's arm. "You fool, you've awakened it. We must retreat, gather the remaining shadow weavers. There is still time to dash." Lyra wrenched her arm free, her gaze fixed upon the towering shadow creature. "No, grandmother. The time for retreat is over. This ends now." Without another word, Lyra turned and raced towards the heart of the village, her grandmother's cries fading behind her as she drew upon her newfound shadow-weaving abilities, determined to confront the curse head-on. Lyra's grip tightened around the ancient family heirloom as she stood before the towering doors of Eldritch's workshop. The once familiar structure now seemed shrouded in an ominous aura, its shadows whispering of dark secrets and the weight of her lineage. With a steadying breath, Lyra pushed the doors open and stepped inside, her heart pounding with determination. The workshop was a whirlwind of activity, Eldritch and the village's scholars frantically poring over ancient tomes and mystical artifacts. The air crackled with a palpable tension, the delicate balance that the Shadow Weavers had maintained for generations now dangerously close to collapse. Lyra approached Eldritch, her mentor's weathered face etched with a rare expression of vulnerability. "The curse has taken hold," he murmured, his voice laced with a hint of despair. "We must act quickly if we are to have any chance of saving the village." Nodding resolutely, Lyra revealed the family heirloom, its intricate design pulsing with a faint, otherworldly glow. "Then let me help. I've learned to harness the power of the shadows. I'm ready to face what's to come." Eldritch's eyes widened in a mixture of pride and trepidation. "Child, you cannot begin to fathom the true extent of this curse. The mistakes of the past have laid the groundwork for this calamity." He paused, his gaze shifting to the ancient tapestry that had started it all. "But if we are to have any hope, I will have to trust in your abilities." With a nod, Eldritch led Lyra deeper into the workshop, the shadows seeming to part before them. They descended into a hidden chamber, the air thick with the scent of forgotten rituals and the weight of untold history. Lyra's fingers traced the tapestry's intricate patterns, her mind racing as she pieced together the fragments of her family's dark legacy. "This tapestry holds the key to the curse's origins," Eldritch explained, his voice grave. The original shadow weavers wove it as a means to maintain the delicate balance between light and shadow. But they underestimated the power they wielded, and their hubris led to its unraveling. Lyra's brow furrowed as she studied the tapestry's shifting symbols. Then it must be rewoven to break the curse. She turned to Eldritch, her eyes burning with conviction. Tell me what I need to do. Eldritch's weathered hand rested on Lyra's shoulder, his expression a mixture of pride and trepidation. The path ahead will be perilous, child. The curse has taken root in the heart of the Whispering Woods, where the original Shadow Weavers met their demise. He paused, his gaze intense. You must be prepared to face the embodiment of the curse itself. Lyra's breath caught in her throat, but she refused to falter. I am ready, Eldritch. For my family, for my village, I will do whatever it takes. With a solemn nod, Eldritch began to explain the intricate ritual required to reweave the tapestry. Lyra listened intently, committing every detail to memory, her fingers tracing the patterns of her family's heirloom. As Eldritch spoke, a growing sense of purpose filled her, the weight of her newfound responsibilities settling upon her shoulders. When the instructions were complete, Lyra turned to Eldritch, her eyes shining with a steely determination. Then let us go. The village needs us. The two shadow weavers emerged from the hidden chamber, their footsteps quickening as they traversed the winding paths of Whispering Woods. The forest, once a peaceful sanctuary, now bristled with an oppressive malevolence, the air heavy with the curse's malignant influence. As they neared the heart of the woods, the ground began to tremble, and the shadows grew thicker, twisting and writhing as if alive. Lyra's grip tightened on the heirloom, its glow intensifying as she channeled her growing command of the arcane arts. Suddenly, a towering, amorphous figure materialized before them, its very essence composed of the darkness that had enveloped the Whispering Woods. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the embodiment of the curse, its malevolent presence overwhelming. The descendants of the Shadow Weavers have returned, the entity hissed, its voice a cacophony of whispers and eldritch echoes. You cannot hope to undo what has been set in motion. Eldritch stepped forward, his weathered features etched with determination. We will not surrender to your corruption, foul creature. The balance must be restored. With a flick of his wrist, Eldritch summoned a swirling maelstrom of shadows, launching them at the entity. Lyra followed suit, her own shadow-weaving abilities surging forth as she fought to push back the encroaching darkness. The battle raged on, the very fabric of the Whispering Woods trembling under the strain of the confrontation. Lyra felt the weight of her family's legacy coursing through her veins, fueling her resolve. She moved with a fluid grace, her shadow-weaving techniques growing more refined and potent with each passing moment. Yet, for every attack they launched, the curse's embodiment seemed to regenerate, its malevolent presence only growing stronger. Lyra's brow furrowed in frustration, her mind racing as she sought a way to turn the tide of the battle. Suddenly, her gaze fell upon the family heirloom, its pulsing glow illuminating a faint pattern within the tapestry's intricate design. Realization dawned upon her, and with a renewed sense of purpose, Lyra stepped forward, holding the artifact aloft. The balance must be restored. She echoed Eldritch's words, her voice carrying a newfound conviction. And I know how to do it. Concentrating her shadow-weaving abilities, Lyra began to manipulate the very fabric of the tapestry, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns with a dancer's grace. The heirloom pulsed with power, channeling her arcane knowledge as she rewove the tapestry's strands. The entity let out a bone-chilling shriek, its form wavering as Lyra's shadow magic disrupted the curse's foundations. Eldritch redoubled his efforts, lending his own considerable powers to Lyra's task, the two shadow weavers working in perfect synchronicity. Slowly, the tapestry's design shifted, the once static patterns coming alive under Lyra's ministrations. The entity thrashed and contorted, its very essence unraveling as the balance was restored. With a final, earth-shattering cry, the curse's embodiment disintegrated, its malevolent essence dispersing into the shadows. Lyra and Eldritch stood amidst the aftermath, their breathing heavy but their expressions triumphant. The Whispering Woods fell silent, the oppressive darkness lifting as the delicate balance was restored. Lyra gazed down at the tapestry, now intricately rewoven, its patterns glowing with a newfound radiance. "It is done," Eldritch murmured, his weathered hand coming to rest on Lyra's shoulder. "You have proven yourself, child. The legacy of the Shadow Weavers now rests upon your shoulders." Lyra met Eldritch's gaze, her expression a mixture of relief and trepidation. "Then I must be prepared to bear that weight. For the sake of my family, and for the protection of this village, I will ensure the balance is maintained." As they made their way back to Whispering Woods, Lyra could not help but feel the burden of her newfound responsibilities. The curse had been lifted, but the cost had been high, and the true test of her mettle was only just beginning. Lyra's limbs trembled as she faced the embodiment of the ancient curse, its shadowy form looming before her. The ethereal entity seemed to ripple and shift, its inky tendrils reaching out to ensnare her. Gripping the family heirloom tightly, Lyra steeled her resolve, knowing that she could not falter in this final confrontation. Drawing upon the well of power within her, Lyra began to weave the shadows, her movements fluid and precise. The tapestry's symbols flashed before her eyes, guiding her as she twisted and manipulated the darkness. The air crackled with the tension of the clashing energies, the village's very fabric trembling under the strain. The shadow creature let out an otherworldly screech, its piercing cry sending shivers down Lyra's spine. It lashed out, its tendrils seeking to overwhelm her, but Lyra met each assault with a flurry of shadow constructs, parrying the attacks with a dancer's grace. As the battle raged on, Lyra felt her strength beginning to wane. The curse's power was immense, fueled by centuries of dark magic and the weight of her family's legacy. She searched her mind for a solution, desperate to find a way to break the stalemate and lift the curse once and for all. Suddenly, a memory surfaced, the cryptic words of the village elder echoing in her mind. "The balance must be restored." Lyra realized that the key to victory lay not in overpowering the curse, but in finding the delicate equilibrium between light and shadow. With renewed determination, Lyra began to shift the flow of her shadow weaving, no longer solely defending against the creature's onslaught. Instead, she wove intricate patterns, creating a tapestry of shadows that mirrored the original, but imbued with a subtle luminescence. The shadow creature recoiled, its form destabilizing as the light began to seep into the darkness. Lyra pressed her advantage, pouring her very essence into the weaving, her movements becoming more fluid and precise with each passing moment. As the final threads were woven, a blinding light erupted from the tapestry, engulfing the shadow creature. Lyra shielded her eyes, feeling the weight of the curse lifting from the village. The air crackled with energy, and then, an eerie silence fell over the Whispering Woods. Lowering her arm, Lyra gazed upon the now tranquil tapestry, its patterns still shifted but no longer imbued with malevolence. The shadow creature had vanished, leaving behind only the faint echo of its anguished cries. Lyra stood there, her body trembling with exhaustion, the family heirloom clutched tightly in her hand. She had succeeded in lifting the curse, but at what cost? The revelations about her family's past had shattered her trust, and the burden she now carried weighed heavily upon her. Slowly, Lyra made her way back to the village, where the inhabitants emerged from their hiding places, their faces etched with relief and gratitude. The village elder approached her, a solemn expression upon his weathered features. "You have done what none before you could," he said, his voice tinged with reverence. "The balance has been restored, but the price is a heavy one to bear." Lyra nodded, her eyes downcast. "I know," she whispered. "The shadow-weaving power is both a gift and a curse, and I must now take on the responsibility of guarding it." The elder placed a weathered hand on her shoulder, offering a sympathetic nod. "You are the last of the shadow weavers, Lyra. The burden you carry is not one to be taken lightly, but I believe you have the strength to shoulder it." Lyra looked up, her gaze meeting the elder's. In that moment, she saw the weight of centuries reflected in his eyes, and she knew that her journey was far from over. The curse may have been lifted, but the echoes of her family's past would continue to haunt her, demanding a reckoning. As the villagers celebrated their deliverance, Lyra retreated to the solitude of Eldritch's workshop, the ancient tapestry now hers to safeguard. She ran her fingers over the intricate patterns, a bittersweet smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I am the last shadow weaver," she whispered to the empty room. "And I will do whatever it takes to protect this village, even if it means facing the darkness within my own heart." Lyra knew that the road ahead would be arduous, filled with difficult choices and moral dilemmas. She had been forged in the crucible of this ancient curse, her once idealistic worldview tempered by the harsh realities of her family's legacy. But she also recognized the responsibility that had been thrust upon her, to safeguard the delicate balance between light and shadow, to ensure that the mistakes of the past were not repeated. With a deep breath, Lyra set to work, her nimble fingers weaving the tapestry anew, imbuing it with her own unique signature. She would not shy away from the challenges that lay ahead, but rather embrace them, for she was the guardian of Whispering Woods, the keeper of a legacy that demanded her unwavering dedication. As the sun set over the village, casting long shadows across the cobblestones, Lyra stood tall, her mind resolute and her heart filled with a bittersweet determination. The Shadow Weaver's legacy was hers to uphold, a burden that she would carry with both humility and strength, for the sake of her beloved community and the delicate balance that hung in the balance. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Whispering Woods. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, push the bell icon for notifications, and share with your friends. Stay tuned for more adventures with Lyra and the mystical world of shadow weaving.